Hey everyone, welcome to the RotoGrinders Morning Grind podcast. Today is Tuesday, May 30th, 2023. Hope everyone had a safe and relaxing Memorial Day weekend. I am Keith Eyster, Ice819, and filling in for Stevie again today. Still on his way back. Guessing he's on his way back from Charlotte now. They did get the race in today, but knew he wasn't going to quite make it back in time to record this one. So you get me again. We have a nice big 13-game slate here to break down for MLB. Alongside me to help me do that is Timothy Buell. You may know him as Tasteful Tides. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Keith. Yes, Stevie must be he must be pretty exhausted. A lot of rain delays for that race. I was registered for my contests on Saturday night and just finally got to watch the race. I don't know, late Monday evening. So it was a pretty good race, and I'm glad Stevie. I always enjoy watching his NASCAR breakdown show and his NASCAR by the numbers article that you can get on his NASCAR package. But yeah, it's great to do a show with you, Keith.
Yeah, you as well. I hosted for the first time with Will yesterday. That went okay. So we've got a much bigger slate here today. But yeah, I think we're starting to get the hang of this. We should be okay without Stevie, but Stevie will be back tomorrow. Yeah, I played a little bit in the race too. That late caution for Kyle Larson that knocked him out of the race was kind of the one that hurt my day. But yeah, good race overall. It's a long race anyway, and then we had the rain all weekend, so
that caution saved me.
Did it? You're light on Larson.
Nice. I was pretty much buried, and then that Larson hiccup brought me into the profit. So
nice.
That was
congrats, man.
Yeah, I got pretty lucky. So.
All right. We've also got Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals going on here as we're recording this. So apologies if we get distracted as this game comes down the stretch. There's a hockey game tonight. Last I saw, Vegas was still in control of that one. Still the case?
Last I looked, but I hadn't looked for a while. I'm kind of just assuming Vegas makes it, and then I'm just gonna watch the Stanley Cup. So that's kind of where I'm at.
There you go. Always good times. All right, like I said, 13 games. Let's go ahead and jump right in here. First game on the slate, we've got the Cleveland Guardians visiting the Baltimore Orioles. Baltimore favored by minus 140, 8.5 total in this game. We've got Cal Quantrill going for the Guardians, Kyle Gibson going for the Orioles. Let's go ahead and start on the Cleveland side here. Any interest in Cal Quantrill on this big slate?
I mean, he's got a 12.8% K rate. He's probably one of the smallest K rates in all of baseball in the amount of innings that he's pitched. I really have no interest. It's a really, really big slate. We're going to need a really big ceiling to have any kind of chance in tournaments. His price is 6,200, which, it's pretty good, but I just don't see the upside. I see a lot of downside this matchup, so I really just don't anticipate getting to any Quantrill.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm out on Quantrill in this matchup. Like you said, big slate. I'm looking for a little bit more ceiling. Even in the cheap range, I think you can find a better ceiling than Cal Quantrill, especially within a matchup with the Orioles, who have been a pretty good offense. Kind of the same thing for me on the other side. Kyle Gibson, just a low K rate pitcher, 16% on the season. He's 7,500, so a touch more than Quantrill even. I'm not scared of this Cleveland offense, but even though there's no power in the order, they just don't strike out enough. So I kind of feel like Gibson doesn't quite have the ceiling I'm looking for on a big slate. How about you? Any interest for you in Gibson?
Given that he's $1,300 more than Quantrill and he is marginally better, I'd almost rather pitch Quantrill. If I had to choose, just because of the savings, I think this is going to be a really, really bad matchup this is a bad matchup for Gibson. It's not really. This just isn't really a couple pitchers that I want to have any exposure to at all. So I think we can skip the pitching.
Yep, I'm with you on that for sure. Let's talk some bats in this game. Cleveland side, lots of contact, not a lot of power. We interested in stacking them up against Gibson here? Or are you passing on bats in this one too?
I think we can always. I'm a big fan of J-Ram. He hasn't really had quite the season that. I mean, he's had kind of a down year, but it's still technically May, right? I mean, we still have a long ways to go for the season, and I think that a lot of these guys on big slates, I think, just from a macro perspective, get kind of forgotten about. So, like, when you see a team, oh, I don't want to stack Cleveland. I don't blame you that if you don't want to stack Cleveland, but I think that getting to some of these like high end one off guys like J Ram is going to be very, very low owned. Ahmad Rosario, I think, is an underrated asset. And I also think that Josh Naylor, like if you're looking, like we'll get to other way better pitching options later in the show. Josh Naylor, he's a viable punt if you want to double pay it for pitching. But for the most part, Cleveland would be a secondary stack. But I do like J Ram as a one-off.
I like the J Ram call. Power's been down a little bit this year, but still one of the best hitters in baseball. He's going to make contact. Guy never strikes out, and he's shown off power and speed in the past. So I think he's going to turn the season around a little bit as well. Like the price is okay at 5,200. I like the Naylor call. If you're looking for a cheap home run, you can certainly take some shots on him. And I agree with you. It's more of a mini stack for me than it is the full stack. It's not an offense that has a ton of upside. I'm not scared of Gibson, but Cleveland's not a team that I've liked to stack much. They've been one of the worst teams in baseball from a WOBA perspective and a WRC plus perspective against right-handed pitching. So I think you can take some shots. I agree with you. They're low owned being the first game of the night, but probably more of a mini stack. On the other side with Baltimore, a little more ceiling on this side of the game for me. How are you feeling about Baltimore?
So Cedric Mullins left Monday night's game with, I think, some sort of a leg injury. And I think that's very, very kind of important news. I would really like to play him against Quantrill. I think this is a matchup that he would really do quite well in. Doesn't sound, I kind of sounds like he might sit on Tuesday, but Baltimore, I think it's a really great stack. Santander, Rauschman, Mountcastle, even like Hayes if he's in the lineup replacing Mullins, something like that. They're kind of priced. I'd say they're priced appropriately, but I think I think that they're in a really, really great matchup against a pitcher that we know is going to give up a lot of contact. So this is not, Quantrill has no swing and miss stuff. So I really like the Orioles, whether it be just getting some pieces here and there or as a full 5-man stack.
Yeah, the full stack's definitely in play for me. Quantrill, like you said, he's just not going to miss many bats. He's a frustrating guy to stack against at times because he does induce quite a bit of soft contact. He'll give up some hard contact too, don't get me wrong, but it just seems like I'm always frustrated when I stack against this guy. But Baltimore, one of the higher ceiling offenses in the game. Love Mullins at the top if he's in the lineup. Love Rutschman. And then we do have some value pieces to make the stack pretty affordable. Gunnar Henderson, it's been a rough season for him, but 3,900, I'm gonna keep chasing him until he turns it around. He's one of the better prospects in all of baseball. Austin Hayes is a name you threw out there. I really like that call. Guy's been really good this season. He has some prospect pedigree as well. Mountcastle at 4,300, big power. Santander 4,600, and Mateo. Even if you want to go for some speed, he's generally buried in the order, but a guy that has a little bit of home run power and all kinds of stolen base upside. So I'm in on that Baltimore stack as well. All right, moving on to the next game here. We've got Milwaukee visiting the Toronto Blue Jays. Blue Jays minus 160 favorites, 9.5 total in the game. Adrian Hauser goes for the Brewers. Yusei Kikuchi for the Blue Jays. Milwaukee has been pretty rough against left-handed pitching. Let's go ahead and start on the Milwaukee side with Hauser, though. Tough matchup for him against Toronto. Any interest in Adrian Hauser?
No, I mean, Hauser's a very similar pitcher to the two guys that we just talked about, Gibson and Quantrill. Again, low strikeout, not intimidating stuff at all. Pretty below average pitcher going against a pretty, fairly strong Toronto team in Toronto. 6,300. No, I think he's the easiest no so far, and we've had some pretty easy no's on pitching. I really have no interest.
Yeah, tough matchup against Toronto. Just not seeing the upside here. against a tough offense. He's had some success this season. I was just looking it up to see what his Sierra is. Sierra's at 4.11. He's been a little bit lucky this year. ERA at 2.25, but that Sierra at 4.11 is probably more indicative of the results going forward. Like you said, K rate under 17%. He's got good control, but against Toronto, I'm out on Hauser. Kikuchi on the other side, he has a little bit more strikeout ability. And this matchup, Milwaukee's a fine, decent offense, but they have been pretty brutal against left-handed pitching. You taking any shots on Kikuchi? It's a bit of a tough price tag for me, 8,400, but I could think of worse things to do, I suppose.
I don't really think he's that bad of a play. Definitely, I think he should be part of your pool. Like if you're 20 maxing, I would definitely get a pinch here, maybe one or two. I think he does have a ceiling in this matchup. The Brewers can be exploited against lefties, so it's just not, it's not really that intimidating of a matchup. And Kikuchi is a pitcher that has a wide, wide degree of outcomes, right? And that's what we want in tournaments. We want a pitcher that can flash a massive ceiling. And of course, sometimes he's got a dud too, and that's part of the variance of playing large field GPPs and DFS. So I don't think I want to get too overboard with my exposure to Kikuchi, but it's not. I don't think it's a horrible play.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. And this is, to be clear, we're talking large field tournaments here, and we're talking a pinch. The price tag is not comfortable. Milwaukee has some power in the lineup, but they're an all or nothing type of offense. They will swing and miss plenty. Just looking up some of the numbers on the Milwaukee offense against lefties this year, because I knew it was brutal. Second worst WRC plus in all of baseball against lefties at 69, 274 WOBA, well below average, the lowest in all of baseball, and a massive 30.4 strikeout rate against left-handed pitching. So that is where the ceiling that we're chasing is coming from. It's very possible Kikuchi goes out here and gives up 3 home runs and your lineup is completely dead. But I also think it's within his range of outcomes to go out here and strike out between 8 and 10. And for 8,300, or 8,400, that's certainly useful. So worth noting that Willy Adames on the concussion IL as well for Milwaukee, who's like their best hitter. So
I was just going to say, Milwaukee's a little bit watered down right now. So, I mean, that just boosts Kikuchi just a little bit more. And at his price, a little marginal, thing like that can go a long way. I'm okay with it. I'm okay. I'm okay with getting him in 1 or 2 if you're in a 20 max setting.
Yep, that sounds good to me. That being said, I am probably taking some shots on some of these Milwaukee bats as well. The lefties are the 2 most expensive in Yelich and Tellez, and I'm probably not full stacking here. I'm looking for home runs. William Contreras has been outstanding against left-handed pitching in his career. He's 3,800. He fills a weak catcher position. I love him as a one-off today. The lineup is pretty watered down. Urias is on the IL as well, who's one of their better hitters against lefties. Brian Anderson is only 3,100. Don't mind that for a cheap home run. And then Taylor is the other cheap outfielder, 2,300. He hasn't really gotten his season off to much of a start at all. He missed a bunch of time at the beginning on the injured list, but he's come back. He has struggled so far, but 2,300, he does have some power and some speed. But these are probably more one-off plays. Maybe you can make it a mini stack. But I don't mind chasing home runs ever against Kikuchi. William Contreras is definitely the standout for me, though. How about you?
Yeah, William Contreras, he might even be like in the cash game conversation for catcher because he's in a really, really strong spot. He's only 3,800. Excellent spot. I think it's Owen Miller's day to day. If he cracks the lineup for 3K, I think he would be a good choice. And then I love the Brian Anderson call. 3,100, third base outfield eligible. This team is definitely more of just like a secondary stack or just like picking off pieces for one-offs.
All right. How about the other side of this game? Toronto, one of the better offenses in baseball. We're not too scared of Adrian Hauser. Are you finding some money to pay up for Toronto today?
Yeah, I mean, we gotta see kind of like what we want to do for pitchers. But I mean, if we can find some solid value at pitching and some cheap bats, and I love Toronto. I think that ownership is not going to get condensed around, one certain team or two teams on this slate. So I think that if you can find stacks that you like, they're gonna go pretty low owned. Vlad has not been really that great, but again, it's early. And I love to get to Vlad, Bichette, Springer, the usual suspects. Don't forget about a guy like Dalton Varsho. I think he would be interesting at 3,700. But this team, it's I think they're a great team, and I think they're in a great spot, and I don't think that they're going to end up being that chalky.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think ownership will be quite spread out on this slate. We have a monster slate, 13 games. Toronto's expensive. We're going to talk about some really solid pitching we want to pay up for. So I agree. I think you're getting a nice ownership number on them. And they always have upside to be the stack you absolutely need on the slate. Bichette has been tearing the cover off the ball. He's my favorite option. Certainly want Vlad in there as well, even though he struggled a little bit. Chapman's had a really nice season. And then Kirk has struggled a little bit. Varsho struggled a little bit, but their prices are kind of reflecting that as well. So you can definitely fit a Toronto stack even with one of, I would say one ace. You probably need to pay down at SP2 and find a cheaper secondary stack, but you can certainly make Toronto work on this big slate. All right, next we have the Cincinnati Reds traveling to Fenway Park to take on the Boston Red Sox. Boston minus 200 favorites here, 9.5 total in the game. We have Lively going for Cincinnati and Brian Bayo, one of the better pitching prospects in baseball, who has been a little bit better here recently, going for the Red Sox. Let's go ahead and start on the Cincinnati side here. Ben Lively has surprisingly pitched okay in his last two starts.
I know. I was just
are we buying into that?
Not really. I was just gonna say, I was like, man, his last two starts have been stellar. I don't know if I'm missing something, but hasn't Devers been out of the lineup the last two games?
He has been dealing with something, yes.
Right. So it's like that's a huge thing for this Boston team. I'm not saying that you have to pitch Lively, but I just want our listeners to be paying attention to that Boston lineup, because without Devers, that's a big hole for this lineup. Boston's just not as deep as they have been in years past. But I'm not really buying into the whole Lively thing. I'd probably don't want to get any Lively, but just be aware of the Devers situation. I think that's the most important part of this game. So if we find out Devers is out, that's a big boost for Lively.
Yeah, it looks like Devers has only played once in the last week or so. He played on May 28th and hasn't played other than that since May 24th. So he's definitely dealing with something. I'm not sure exactly what it is. But yeah, good note there. I'm with you. I'm not really buying into this Lively stuff. If it were a better matchup, maybe I would have more interest. And Boston's not a team I'm terribly afraid of. They just don't strike out a ton. It's a really good hitter's ballpark as well, so probably too much risk. I mean, if I truly believed Lively was going to strike out 8 every time he took the mound, of course he would be in play here, but I'm not buying it. I need to see it a little bit more. And the other reason is the guy on the other side of this game I know I have interest in. Bayo is starting to figure it out. He's still only 7K. And he's got a matchup here against Cincinnati, who they've actually been pretty hot here recently as well. But Bayo is a guy with some pedigree and some upside. At 7K, I'm interested in Bayo. How about you? Are you taking any shots on Bayo?
I love Bayo. I think he's a great play on the slate. I am on board with his long-term kind of pedigree. I think he's, once he gets his control in order, which he has been doing, I think he's elite. I think the ground balls are real. It's just, like I think he's a great play. We haven't had a lot of pitching so far in the first 3 games that we broke down, But as of right now, he's my favorite pitcher. That's not saying a lot, but he is only 7K. And I think this is a matchup that he could really dominate. He's up to 23.5% strikeouts this year, 7.5% walks. Last season, he was over 10% walks. So his
Yep.
control is getting better. And I think that's the big kind of knock on him. So if he can keep those walks down, this is a matchup that he should really excel in.
Yeah, completely agree. And like you said, we're going to go through some pitching. He's my favorite so far as well. But even once we get through the entire slate, as far as this range, like 7K and below, he's still going to be the guy that's popping quite a bit for me. Love the spot for Bayo. You broke it down really well. Ground ball skills are real. He's shown that in the minors. Even when he was struggling last year, he was showing ground ball skills. The walks are coming down, and I think there's room up on the strikeouts as well. Cincinnati is one of the higher strikeout teams in baseball against right-handed pitching, 24.4%. They're seventh highest in the league. So plenty of upside for Bayo. Love the price tag. Love the matchup. He will be definitely one of my higher rostered pitchers today. All right, let's go on to some bats here. We have interest in Bayo. That said, he is a young guy. Any interest in the Cincinnati bats against him?
Not really. McLean is kind of getting too expensive. Like, he was cheap and he was like always like an okay punt that you go with Cincinnati. He's too expensive for me now. India's almost 6,000. Like, yeah, I get it. He's good, but I this Cincinnati team's priced pretty high, and I think I'm gonna have to put them in the category of, if they beat me, they beat me. Because I'm gonna be overweight on Bayo, and I don't really have any interest in these Cincinnati bats.
Yeah, I'm going to be overweight on Bayo. The reason they're priced up so much is because they just beat up on my Cubs for a 3-game series. They scored a bunch of runs in Wrigley Field, even though the wind was blowing in. It is what it is, but yeah, I'm probably out on Cincinnati as well. I definitely prefer the Bayo side of this matchup. If you wanted to do a mini stack, McLean, like you mentioned, decent price. Senzel's been hitting decently since he came back. Steer has some power, but yeah, I don't really love the pricing on these Reds. Friedel, I suppose, if he's at the top of the order, is a guy with a lot of speed upside. But I'm mostly out on Cincinnati. Boston on the other side, like you mentioned, I think it depends on whether Devers is in this lineup. He's certainly the highest upside bat that we have available here. I don't know what to think of Ben Lively. He's obviously a career journeyman. He's been overseas. He's been great in his last 2 starts, but I'm not sure that that's real. So I don't really know what to do with Boston. Where are you standing on Boston?
Yeah, Devers is huge. If Devers is in, I love him. I always really love Devers against kind of an inferior, below average pitcher, especially at Fenway. But they are priced. Boston is priced appropriately. Like, Yoshida is almost 6,000. Verdugo is 5K. I think that's a little too expensive for Verdugo. Tapia is still 2,200, so he's like a viable value play. Cassis is 2,700. I think he would be a fine value play. So the way that Boston is priced, you've got some guys at the low end, and then you got some really premium bats that are priced, more appropriately. So I think you can really stack this team if you want to. That being said, I think there'll be better spots as we move along the slate. And but yeah, it's Devers for me if he's in.
Yeah, I love the Cassis call as well. He's a guy I've played a bunch of because they won't raise his price, and there's some power in there. I know he struggles with strikeouts and things like that, and Lively's actually shown some strikeout ability, but I'm fine using cheap guys along with Devers to make a little mini stack work. If you wanted to do like Devers, Tapia, Cassis, that's pretty affordable as a secondary stack. I'm on board with something like that. I don't know how much I full stack them because to get to Devers and Yoshida is pretty tough. And then Verdugo's a bit overpriced. You could certainly throw Justin Turner or Jarren Duran in the mid 3Ks, but probably not much of a full stack for me. I think there are other offenses that have some more upside. All right, moving on to the next one here. We've got the Philadelphia Phillies taking on the New York Mets. The Mets favored by -130, 8.5 total in the game. We have Ranger Suarez going for the Phillies, Kodai Senga going for the Mets. Starting over here on the Philly side, any interest in Ranger Suarez here against the Mets?
I never thought he would be this cheap and that I would have no interest in playing him. I feel like he used to be like in the 7K range and he'd be like an okay play and we'd play him in tournaments, sometimes even cash games. But now, I mean, it's like there's something really, really wrong with him. 5,200, I get it if you really want to punt, but I really can't get behind it in this matchup. I think this is the Mets have, been not great this year, but they're still a very, very talented offense. And so I cannot endorse Ranger Suarez on this slate.
Yeah, I'm with you. When I saw his name and his price tag, I was like, oh man, might have to consider that. The matchup is not great. I know the Mets have struggled a little bit, but they don't strike out a ton. And Suarez has not been right. If it were a different matchup, I might try to dig in a little bit and figure out what's going on. But he's given up at least 5 hits in all 3 of his starts this season. His leash has been really short. He was up to 85 in his last one, but 66 in the one before that, 72 before that. So you're probably looking at a max of 90-ish pitches, I would think. Seems like they're being a little bit careful bringing him back. And he just hasn't been very good when he's been out there. He's a guy who typically sits around league average with his K rate, but this matchup against the Mets has me not wanting to take too many chances. Just pulling up the numbers here. The Mets against lefties, slightly above average, 104 WRC plus, strikeout rate under 20%. So there's not much upside here for Suarez.
He's purely dependent on BABIP. That's what it will come down to. He's not going to strike out everybody. It's going to be, can he put together 4 or 5 innings, maybe get a couple strikeouts, and somehow keep New York at bay and get you 13 fantasy points. I think that's your best kind of outcome with him, and I don't like that in any format, whether it be large field or like a smaller entry single entry.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. On the other side, we have Kodai Senga, who has flashed elite upside. Struck out 12 Rays, 2 starts back. Struck out 6 Cubs his last time out. He's been right in that 6 to 7 strikeout range in most of his starts. I believe in this guy's stuff. I think there's more in that. But what is really difficult for me is his walks. Like he's clearly going to continue struggling with walks. And that's, kind of to be expected coming over from Japan, a little bit different baseball, a much more intensive schedule. And obviously then the guys that he's facing in MLB a step above what he's facing over there in Japan. So definitely an adjustment period. I believe in the stuff. I think he can rack up strikeouts here, but the walks limit the ceiling for me a little bit. Where do you stand on Senga? 9,700, not quite at the top range of pitching, but pretty close to it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, he's just a little bit too expensive for a guy who's got a 14.5% walk rate. Like, that really makes me nervous. Like, even if he comes back towards like what projection systems have him like as his baseline around 10, that's still pretty high for a guy who's so expensive. So like you said, elite strikeout ability. Like he does have good stuff, but his price for me needs to come down a little bit for me to have more interest. I think we're going to get to some couple pitchers like right around him that I find much safer and have better upside. But his upside is so good though that I don't think you need to X amount out of an MME pool. Like if you're making 20 or 150 or something like that, I think you can get a pinch just because he does have such an elite K stuff. But I wouldn't go too overboard with him.
Yeah, similar play as Kikuchi for me. He's a little bit overpriced for where we want him, and the matchup is not ideal. Philly does have some strikeouts in the lineup, but there's a couple of guys just above him in the pricing tier that I think we're both going to have a ton of interest in. Like I said, just not quite a big enough of a discount on this massive slate, but you can certainly play a couple of them just for that strikeout upside, certainly. How about Philly bats against him? Any interest there?
I think it would be a pass for me. They're just not they're not cheap enough. He's too kind of good of a pitcher. I mean, anytime a pitcher has such a high walk rate, that could really lead to the game getting broken open, by the opposing team. But like Harper is, 5,800. Turner 5,300. I guess Schwarber might be an interesting one-off at 4,700, but not a team. They're just too expensive. So I think I'd most likely pass on them.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat because of the ballpark. If this game were in Philly, I would have a lot more interest, and I'd be chasing home runs for sure with this team. In City Field, it's one of the best pitchers parks in all of baseball. Philly, we're not getting a discount on Philly. Singa has ridiculous strikeout ability, so I'm with you. I love stacking against pitchers that struggle with walks. I don't love the ballpark. I don't love the pricing here. Schwarber is an elite one-off at 4,700 in my opinion. He has 2 homer power in any matchup, in any ballpark. So you can certainly take shots there. I'm probably not stacking them there. Stacking them though. If you want to pay up for Harper, he's a fine one-off as well. Over on the Mets side, we've got Pete Alonso against a lefty. That's certainly intriguing most days.
I was just gonna say, Paul Bark. I don't care what the ballpark is. I love Pete Alonso in this spot. Even Lindor is fine. Marte, he's clearly having a pretty down year, but I think at 3,800, he would be okay play too. And then Alvarez, the catcher,
Yep.
for the Mets, 3,100. I really like the Mets. I completely agree with you. The ballpark really stinks for offensive production, but I just think Ranger Suarez is pretty broken, and I think they can get to him pretty easily. So I really like the Mets.
Yeah, I mean the pricing that you were touching on there, it's surprisingly low. And we talked about the Mets having their struggles a little bit, but Pete Alonso is probably a 6K hitter. He's 5,500, so that's a slight discount. Lindor, I mean, we've seen him above 5K often. He's 4,800. Nimmo's lefty. I don't know about that. Marte has a cheap price. He's struggled, but he certainly has power and speed still. Love the Alvarez call. He's probably going to be a very popular catcher on the slate at 3,100. He's really starting to hit. He's one of the better prospects in all of baseball. So 3,100 for Alvarez. Love that at catcher. Vientos, another cheap guy, another decent prospect with some power. I think you could roster him as well if he's in the lineup. It's been a real struggle for Tommy Pham. He's 2,800, but overall, this Mets team is just a little bit underpriced. The ballpark's not great, but the starting pitcher on the other side has not been great either. And they're all about $500 too cheap is the way I'm reading it.
This is like an ownership thing for me. If the Mets aren't going to be owned really, I think this is a spot where I'd want to get overweight. So this is definitely a spot where I'm going to want to check out ownership percentage, because if they're kind of a forgotten about team, that's going to make me like them even more.
All right, let's go ahead and keep rolling along here. Next one, we've got the Kansas City Royals visiting the St. Louis Cardinals. St. Louis, big minus 205 favorites, 9 run total in this game. You've got Zach Greinke still trying to throw baseballs here in 2023. Miles Mikolas on the other side for the Cardinals. Any interest in Zach Greinke at 6,100 against the Cardinals?
That's an easy no. I'm not even going to bother. I mean, look at the pitching on this slate, Keith. This is this is awful.
We're getting there. There's going to be some good ones, I promise.
I know, but so far, man, this has been an ugly slate for pitching. No, definitely no Greinke for me. I think that's easy.
Yeah, easy no for me as well. Miles Mikolas on the other side, another low strikeout pitcher. Kansas City, a better matchup than what Greinke has. So any interest in Mikolas at 77?
I do a little bit. But we've already talked about like Kikuchi and Bayo, guys that are kind of like hovering in that same price range that I prefer those guys more. Mikolas, Definitely not very low, very, very low strikeout, but he does have very, very good control, and I'm not intimidated by this Kansas City lineup. So I think he's okay, but I like other guys better around him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would play Bayo at least 8 out of 10 times ahead of
Yes,
Michaelis, maybe
I
9 out of
completely
10.
agree with yes.
Um, I don't think I get to Michaelis. Like, just it's a good matchup against Kansas City, but there's just not enough strikeout upside for me here. Um, all right, let's go ahead and flip on over to the bats here. Kansas City against Michaelis. Really good control guy, ground ball guy in Michaelis. Kansas City not an elite offense. What are your thoughts on Kansas City?
Uh, you know, Prado remains cheap at 3,100. First base, outfield. He's a decent salary saving option. Bobby Witt is starting. Bobby Witt was pretty cheap there for quite a while, and they're finally starting to price him up. So that will keep his ownership down, though. I'm a big fan of Bobby Witt. I know that they kind of like were dropping him down to the 6 hole. Um, I saw him batting cleanup. I've seen him batting leadoff. Like, I'm not really sure kind of like where they're going to land with him on that, but I just love Bobby Witt's skill set. So, and then of course Sal Perez, always an option, always an elite one off. If you're looking to pay up a catcher, Sal Perez is kind of like that blue chip kind of style catcher, right? Like he's always there. He's in a great spot. So there would be those three. Vinny P at 3,800, he's okay. Melendez at 3,500. This team could be an interesting secondary stack, or you could do like a one off of like Witt or a one off of Perez.
Yeah, that's not a full stack for me, just because I respect Michaelis as a pitcher. Does a pretty good job of keeping the ball on the ground, but he's not going to miss a ton of bats. I could see him giving up a home run or two. So I could be talked into a secondary stack of Kansas City. Witt and Sal Perez, certainly the high upside guys. I think you can certainly pair them with a salary saver like Pasquantino or Melendez or Prado. So exact same thoughts as you on Kansas City here. Not a full stack, but certainly don't mind the secondary. On the other side, we've got St. Louis here going up against Greinke. Are they a priority for you today?
They're going to be up there. Like I would assume that like Nolan Gorman is going to be pretty popular. He seems to be like a recent darling for St. Louis. People are really caught on to how good of an offensive bat he is. So I like Gorman, Paul Goldschmidt, Paul DeJong. I think Lars Nootbaar got hurt on, I don't know, either today or a couple days ago.
Yeah,
So
he
he
left the
might,
game Monday early.
yeah. So he's an interesting one to look out for. But yeah, I mean, the St. Louis team should get to Greinke. Greinke's not like a complete gas can, but he just, if he's not pitching, if he's not hitting his spots, he's dead, right? Like if his control's not good, like he's not even, he's so far gone from his prime. So I think St. Louis is in a fantastic spot.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you said there that Greinke's not a complete gas can. I do agree with that sentiment. He doesn't get blown up all that often. He finds a way to induce some soft contact. He's not going to strike anybody out, but he finds a way to get through 5 innings fairly unscathed at times, it seems like. That being said, I still don't mind taking plenty of shots on St. Louis. Love the Gorman call. He's been awesome this season. Goldschmidt is off to another fantastic season. If Nootbaar is out of there, like Donovan is 2,800. If he hits in the middle of the order, I certainly like that. I think Burleson's pretty much guaranteed to be in there if Nootbaar sits, and he's only 2,300. So like there's some cheap pieces to help you get up to the Gorman, the Goldschmidts, and the Arenados as well. I think I'm fine with the full stack, even though Greinke can have some success. He's got good control, but you hope that control's off a little bit, like you said, and then he's going to get into trouble in a real hurry. All right, next game we've got the Tampa Bay Rays against the Chicago Cubs. We have Shane McClanahan on the bump and making Tampa Bay a massive -200 favorite. Only a 7.5 total in this game. Kyle Hendricks on the other side. He came back for his first start of the season. Luch in the chat, shout out to Luch, says, how many home runs will Josh Lowe hit off Hendricks tomorrow, and why is it at least 2? So Hendricks has certainly struggled with the power here recently. His much like Greinke, his formerly elite control has escaped him at times, and he can get into a ton of trouble when that happens. Not a great matchup for him against this elite Tampa Bay offense. Let's start with McClanahan. He's expensive, 11-4. One of the higher strikeout rates on the slate. Are you making McClanahan a priority here at the top range of pitching?
Yeah, I mean, we finally have a real pitcher, right? Now we are now 6 games into this slate, and we really haven't had any like true elite pitcher. So yeah, I mean, he's almost a 30% K rate. Walks have been a little high, almost 10%, but he's not horrible. This is a real good matchup. It hasn't been, the weather hasn't been great at Wrigley either. So if like the wind's still blowing in like it has been, I mean, that's just going to be a bigger boost for McClanahan. So he's going to be, I would assume he's going to be your cash game pitcher. There's a couple other guys we need to get to later on, but he would be a great option. And I love him. So he's very consistent. This is a matchup that he should excel in. This is a very weak pitching slate. So I don't have many bad things to say about him.
The only thing I will say is I do like how the Cubs line up against lefties better than how they line up against righties. That being said, there's still going to be a ton of strikeouts in this lineup. Wisdom is almost certainly going to be in there against a lefty. He's got a strikeout rate in the mid-30s. Chris Morel is going to be in there. He has come down from his insane heater, and he's got a strikeout rate above 30%. Like outside of Horner at the top of this order, there's quite a bit of strikeouts throughout the rest of the lineup. McClanahan is sitting at 29, just over 29% on the season. That is the highest K rate on the entire slate. So his price is justified. Like you said, wind has been blowing in at Wrigley as well. That would definitely be a nice bump for him. McClanahan is among the top options. I think there's a guy that I prefer slightly, just because he's a little bit cheaper, but McClanahan has as much upside on as anybody on this entire slate. It's an elite strikeout spot for him. If he's got the wind blowing in behind him, that's just another boost for him. So fire up McClanahan, all formats for sure. Kyle Hendricks on the other side. We know Luch isn't playing any. I'm probably out. I know Marcus Stroman shut down Tampa Bay, went for the complete game shutout on Monday night. Hendricks is not quite on the same level as Marcus Stroman anymore. He is cheap. Where was his pitch count at last? In the 86 pitches in the last one, so pretty fully stretched out. You're not hardly going to get 95 out of him, or much more than 95 ever. So 86 is about his full leash. He's cheap, but that being said, we have what's been the best offense in all of baseball on the other side. Are you going to try to save any money with Hendricks today?
I told everybody on Grinders Live on Monday that don't pitch Stroman. So that didn't work out very well. But no, I have no interest in Hendricks. It's not a good spot. He's just coming back. There are cheaper pitchers on the slate that are far superior to him. I'm just going to say what I said, on Monday. I don't want to go after Tampa Bay. I don't care if they're going to regress. I don't care if they're, not this good, quote unquote. They're still an amazing team. And they're not a team I want to attack. So I'll pass on him easily.
Yep, I'm out on Hendricks as well. Let's go ahead and start talking about those Tampa Bay bats. Even if the wind is blowing in, Hendricks has given up a ton of hard contact over the last few seasons. So even if we get a little weather here, I'm interested in some Tampa bats. How about you?
Yeah, I love that price on Wander Franco. He's 5,100. Yeah. I know that sounds kind of expensive, but I think he's probably 500-600 too cheap. Brandon Lau, 5,100. Josh Lowe, 4,900. Randy Rosarina, of course, you can play anytime. He's definitely the most expensive, 5,700. That might be a little steep, but he always has a ceiling. So I mean, this team is so strong up and down the lineup. Like they have such good depth 1 to 9 that it makes sense that their stacks have done so well over the course of the season, because they're a really, really strong team, even though they don't have a quote unquote like a superstar. But they've got 3 guys that are pretty close to being superstar, and then they have some depth pieces that are very strong. So I do like Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's the lefties for me as well. Franco, a little too cheap. Brandon Lau, it's been a bit of a struggle for him, but we know he's got a ton of power still. Josh Lowe has been amazing. He's been leading off a lot, so probably locked in for at least 3 at bats against Hendricks. Good spot for him. Luke Raley is a cheap guy that I would definitely add to the mix. Another lefty, 3,400, and he's shown off quite a bit of power. He's got 10 home runs already this season, so I really like Luke Raley to save a little bit of money in this stack. But yeah, I'm right there with you. Tampa Bay is definitely stackable on this slate. Full stack for me. We've got Cubs bats on the other side, but Shane McClanahan, one of the better pitchers in all of baseball. Any interest in the Cubs here against the big lefty?
No. I mean, even if I was building 150, I think I'd just X out the whole team.
Yep, I'm completely with you there. Just too tough of a matchup. Best strikeout rate on the slate. Cubs are still pretty priced up, so no interest for me either. We will go ahead and keep it moving here. We've got the Los Angeles Angels taking on the Chicago White Sox. Minus 150 favorite for the White Sox. 8.5 total in the game. We've got Tyler Anderson going for the Angels and Lucas Giolito going for the White Sox. Go ahead and start on the Angels side here. Any interest in Tyler Anderson?
Probably not. 5,700, just not. I mean, White Sox are a team that we can pick on, but I don't think that this is necessarily the pitcher that we need to do it with, or the slate that we need to do it with. I would say that Tyler Anderson is, I would say, better than some of the cheaper options that we've had, but not by a whole heck of a lot. So it's not, I mean, again, another one of these super, super low K rates, high walk rates. It's just, I actually think that DK did a really good job of kind of tempting people with these really, really bad pitchers, just hanging their prices like well below 6K to be like, oh, do I want to take a shot? I don't really think you do. I don't think you need to take a shot on a guy like Anderson.
Yeah, I don't think so either. If it was the version of Tyler Anderson that we saw last year, we'd be all aboard at 5,700. He has not been able to replicate that success here with the Angels. Like you said, really low K rate, under 14%, and his walk rate is really what's hurting him as well, over 10%. So I don't mind the matchup against the White Sox, but he hasn't shown enough skills for me to take any shots on him today. How about Lucas Giolito on the other side here at 9,200?
So when I first looked at this slate, I was like, no way, but I don't know. I think he's actually okay, because I mean, there are better plays, but he does have a 24% K rate, 7% walk rate, and then the other thing that I looked at is that he's got a pretty high BABIP, so he's gotten a little bit unlucky this year. So I think he's an okay play. He does seem a little bit expensive, but I think that's what the field will think also. So I think for tournaments he would be in the bucket for me. I would not exclude him. He wouldn't be in my first 3 lineups. He might not even be in my first 10. But if I got up to like 20 lineups or so, I think I'd have to throw him in.
Yeah, similar play to Senga, right? Probably a little bit overpriced. Not the best matchup in the world. But the Angels lineup, once you get past Trout and Ohtani, it's deeper than it has been in the past, but it still falls off towards the bottom there quite a bit. Should be some easy outs down at the bottom of the order. Giolito has some strikeout ability. He always seems to give up home runs. Like, he could be cruising in a game and then he gets touched for a home run. It's just part of playing him. So it, like with Senga, it's not without risk, but I wouldn't call you crazy for wanting to play him on this slate. All right, let's go ahead and talk about some bats here. How about those Angels? I just mentioned Giolito's home run problems. Are they a full stack for you? Are you chasing home runs, or would you rather play, or just rather have Giolito shares?
If I'm not gonna. I don't want to stack the Angels. You can play Otani and Trout against anybody, on any slate, but the rest of this team, I'm not really about the Angels stack. So I think it's Otani and Trout for one off, and that's honestly it for me.
I'm kind of with you mostly. Trout, I love. Giolito has been a reverse splits pitcher his whole career. Trout has been a reverse splits hitter as well. So this is a good Trout lines up really well in this matchup. I would say I don't mind Renfroe at 3,900 trying to chase home runs. Again, I don't think I'm stacking against Giolito either. But trying to find a cheap home run is certainly viable outside of Otani and Trout, and Hunter Renfroe, I think, is where I would look for that. Walsh is back. He's got power, but again, Giolito has those reverse splits, so I don't love the matchup for him. But just another name to throw out there. I'll give you Hunter Renfroe. How about White Sox on the other side?
I actually have some interest just as salary saving options like Andrew Vaughn, 3,400, Berger, 3,300, Jimenez, 3,200. I think that's pretty good savings. Robert's only 4,600, Moncada's 4,200. Like we just talked about how Anderson can't strike anybody out. He's going to walk a bunch of guys. I don't like the White Sox. Like they're not a very good offensive team, but these salaries are tough to pass up. So I think honestly, like if you find some builds where you want to double pay up for pitcher, say McClanahan or a couple guys that we'll get to, and you need like a cheap stack, I think the White Sox are viable for that.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at these prices, Eloy coming back and being only 3,200. He hasn't been great this season, but Eloy is a much better hitter again than 3,200, and this matchup against Tyler Anderson's pretty great for him. Love that call. Jake Berger and Andrew Vaughn right there with you. That little 3-man mini stack right there, I will have quite a bit of exposure to that. I don't like. I'm fine going up for Anderson and Robert as well. They're both below 5K. There is some upside there amongst them. I don't know the White Sox are going to score 10 runs in this spot, so I prefer them as a secondary stack. I wouldn't try to talk you out of the full stack though, just because they are pretty cheap on the slate. All right. Now we will move on to the next game. We have the Minnesota Twins at the Houston Astros. Minnesota favored as minus 115 here, 8-run total in this game. We've got Joe Ryan going for the Minnesota Twins, Brandon Bielak for the Houston Astros. Joe Ryan has been incredible this season. Tougher matchup against the Astros. How are we feeling about Joe Ryan at 11,100 salary?
Love Joe Ryan. I just don't want him to be popular, and I don't think he will be. I think people are going to be scared away from this matchup, which makes me love him for larger field tournaments. I think this is going to be a pretty tough matchup for him, but that K rate and those low walks, I love that. I just don't, Houston can beat anybody. But if Ryan's got it working, then I think he could beat this team. And that's the kind of situation that you want to get exposure to in tournaments, because people are going to play McClanahan. They're going to play, we'll get to him, but they're going to play Zach Gallen. So it's like, whereas Joe Ryan's going to be kind of a forgotten guy, I think. And if that's the case, I love him for tournaments.
Yeah, I am right there with you. Joe Ryan is one of my favorite pitchers on the entire slate. 11-1 is a big ask, but the guy has elite upside now. I've talked about it several times, whether you read my stuff on Scores and Odds or Expert Survey or anything like that. Joe Ryan's pitch mix, adding the splitter, you've seen his K rate skyrocket. He's just shy of 29%. But the one thing that is still true with him is he has massive splits. Like, he is dominant against righties, and he is more close to average against lefties. Obviously, the Astros have two very scary lefties in this lineup, but outside of that, they're pretty right-handed heavy. Just to put some numbers to it, 35% strikeout rate to right-handers, 22.8% strikeout rate for Joe Ryan against lefties. So I think he matches up really well here. Obviously, having to get past Alvarez and Tucker is a scary proposition with a guy who struggles against lefties. But I'm going to take some shots on Joe Ryan for sure. I agree with you. I think there's at least 2 or 3 pitchers that are going to be higher owned on this slate in this very top range. There are certainly going to be cheaper pitchers that are higher owned as well. But amongst the, like, let's say 9,500 and above guys, I think Ryan is 3rd or 4th just in that tier alone.
He's the most likely to get squeezed,
Yep.
in this expensive range. I think that's pretty obvious, and I think you and I are in agreement that this is he's a really, really strong pitcher. So I think he's great for tournaments.
Yep, absolutely love it. So we'll definitely have exposure to him. All right. How about Brian Bielak on the other side? 6,800. He's been okay through his first couple of starts this season. Minnesota's a decent enough offense. How are we feeling about Bielak?
He's in that price range with guys that we've already mentioned that I like a lot more. So, I prefer to get to Bayo. I don't know. I don't really, Minnesota's not a great team, but I think I'll pass with him.
Yeah, I do want to see the ownership here. If Bayo ends up popular, I don't mind Bielak as a pivot, just because Minnesota strikes out a bunch. They have the second highest strikeout rate in baseball against right-handed pitching, all the way up at 26%. Only Oakland is worse. That being said, they do have a really solid 184 ISO against righties and a 105 WRC plus. So they're a solid offense against righties, but they do strike out a fair amount. So if I'm looking for a pivot off of Bayo, I don't mind Bielak. That said, I hope Bayo is low owned and I can just play a ton of Bayo. I definitely prefer him. Minnesota batters in this game. Bielak, like I said, he's more of an average pitcher. It's a price play. I'm not scared of him. This Minnesota offense has some talent. How do you feel about Minnesota bats?
I mean, we saw Buxton sit. That I hope that's not an injury, but I mean, without Buxton, this lineup is just not as good. I assume Buxton will be back. The one thing that I do want our listeners to know is about Royce Lewis.
Yeah,
I believe he was a former number 1 pick, right, Keith? Yeah, I know
he was first rounder for sure.
First rounder, okay, yeah, and blew his knee out, and he's back, and he's min price. Yep. He was min price on Monday. He hit a home run, and now he's min price again. So boy, you have a great punt just sitting there at shortstop already. So he's gonna be a standout play. He'll be like a popular cash game play, popular probably in single entries too, and the higher dollar stuff. But I just wanted everyone to know, like, he's a far superior hitter than a 2K hitter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that helps make the Minnesota stacks work. We talked about White Sox as a cheap secondary stack. I'm interested in Minnesota as a cheap secondary stack as well. Royce Lewis is a great call, like you just mentioned. There's a bunch of other young hitters that I'm interested in this lineup as well. Kirilloff at 3,200 is certainly fine. Julien at 2,700 is a talented prospect. Like there's just a lot of good young talent here for this Minnesota team, and they're all pretty cheap. So, like, I don't necessarily need to get up for Buxton and Correa in this matchup. Like, Houston has an awesome bullpen. Bielak has been solid enough. But if I need 3 cheap pieces, this Minnesota team, I certainly don't mind that.
And even Gallo and Kepler. I mean, Gallo's only 4K. Kepler's 39. I mean, that's very, very affordable. I think that's a really good call.
All right. How about the Houston side here? We both respect Joe Ryan as a pitcher, but Houston has some talent there. What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the reverse splits. So, I mean, I guess Jordan or Tucker, right? But it's not Ryan's not going to be popular enough to where I can say, oh, get some leverage against a chalky pitcher. I don't think he's going to be that popular. So I find them unnecessary, even though they're a great offense.
Yep, I'm right there with you. The two guys I want to play are both really expensive. And I'm like, if you play Jordan and you get a home run from him, is that even enough on this slate? Like, you probably need two, or at least a home run and a double for him to pay off that salary on this slate. I'm probably out on Astros here against Joe Ryan, who I have a lot of trust in and respect him a ton. Moving on to the next game here, we have the Atlanta Braves against the Oakland Athletics. Atlanta big -245 favorites in this one, 8.5 run total. We've got Bryce Elder going for the Braves, JP Sears going for Oakland. Bryce Elder's been solid, but that price tag is up there at 9,300. It is one of the best matchups in all of baseball for a right-handed pitcher. Are we paying 9,300 for Bryce Elder?
I think you can. He's one of the reasons why I was reluctant to have any kind of positive take about Giolito, because he's right around Giolito's price. Elder is safer than Giolito. I think that's definitely the case. He's cheaper. I think he's safer than even a guy like Senga. He might not have the ceiling of those two guys, but I think he's safer than those two. So when you're breaking on the slate as a whole, it's like I think that you can get more safety, even though he's only got a 21% K rate. But I think that this matchup is so good that I really have no issue with people getting to him. He's such a big favorite. Oakland is awful, so I really don't mind it. It's just I don't know if he has a ceiling to actually win you a tournament.
That last thing you said right there is kind of how I feel. I'm not sure. I know the matchup is great, and no, it wouldn't surprise me if he went 7 clean innings here against Oakland. Is 7 innings and 7 strikeouts of clean baseball enough at 9,300? Maybe, but we've got the McClanahans and the Joe Ryans. Even if Senga pops off for a big game, you're going to need more than that. So I am concerned about the ceiling. I agree with your points about safety. It's a fantastic matchup for Elder. I think my style of play, I'm generally in large field tournaments. I'm playing a little bit riskier, and I'm looking for more ceiling. So I don't think I get to Elder often enough. But I do agree with your points about it's a great matchup in a great ballpark. And it does provide a little more upside than he typically has. But I wish he was a little cheaper, then I'd be much more apt to load him up. But a little bit too pricey for his ceiling, I think. On the other side, JP Sears gets a really tough Atlanta offense. How are you feeling about JP Sears?
I think JP Sears is a decent pitcher. I just don't want to go there in this matchup. I know that it's a great ballpark for pitchers, but Atlanta is one of the best offenses in baseball. They've got really, really great right-handers. They have strong lefties, up and down the lineup. I actually wouldn't be shocked to see, maybe people take a couple shots on him, but I think I'll pass. His control is really good. He has a 23.5% strikeout rate, but
I think he's Oakland's best pitcher. I think that's pretty safe to say.
Yeah, but that's not saying
that's not saying much. But
right, that's I was like, yeah. I mean, that is true, but I don't know if you I don't know if he's that proud of that. So
fair enough,
right? So yeah, this matchup is tough, man. I don't really want to go there.
It is. It's the same thing I said with Bielak. If Bayo is popular, maybe I'm looking for pivots in this range. If Bayo is 15% owned or something like that, I'm just comfortable going way overweight on Bayo. I don't need to mess with the Bielaks and the Sears. But those are the two names that I'll consider if Bayo shows up with 30% projected ownership or something like that tomorrow. And I'm looking for pivots. Otherwise, I'll leave Sears and Bielak both on the shelf. All right, you just talked about some of those upside Atlanta bats. Sears is certainly a guy who has been susceptible to the home run. We have the Oakland bullpen, which has been just atrocious behind him. Tell me what you like about Atlanta.
Yeah, anytime you do a show about baseball, you have to talk about how bad the Oakland bullpen has been.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings me to a point of like, don't forget about Matt Olson. Like he's gonna be left on left to start the game, but that's not gonna be how he ends the game. So don't forget about him in your Atlanta stacks. The obvious choices would be Acuna and Riley and Murphy. But don't forget about Olson because he's going to be, he's going to get some chances against that horrible Oakland bullpen. Ozuna is very very cheap at 2,900. It's Rosario 2,400. So I mean, there's a couple cheap pieces that you can get to. I you know stacking a team in Oakland, it can always be kind of tough because it's such a bad hitters park. But I love Atlanta.
Yeah, I love Atlanta as well. I think anytime Oakland is on a slate, whoever their opponent is going to be one of the top stacks on the slate. It's just been so profitable this year to stack against Oakland. Their starting pitching has been awful. Their bullpen has been just as bad. So, agree. I like going into Oakland is not an ideal spot for the Braves, but because you get to face the Oakland pitching staff, it turns into an ideal spot. So, Atlanta, one of the highest upside stacks on the entire slate. Oakland on the other side, Bryce Elder's been a pretty decent pitcher. How are you feeling about Oakland bats? Any interest?
I'm not. I have no interest, none at all. They very. They're cheap, but there's other cheap bats and better spots on the slate.
Yep, I agree with you. Tough ballpark. Elder's been really solid. Good Braves bullpen behind him. I will find value elsewhere as well. Next game coming up, New York Yankees going to the Seattle Mariners. Minus 130 favorites for the Mariners. 7 run total in this game. I believe that's the lowest on the slate. We have Nestor Cortez for the Yankees, Logan Gilbert for the Mariners. A couple of really good starting pitchers in this one. Let's start on the Yankees side. Nestor Cortez, 8,600. How are we feeling about Nasty Nestor today?
Nasty Nestor, he's going to project really well. He always does. I'm looking at Derek Hardy's the bat projections right now, next day projections, and like right now he's number 2, in raw points.
Raw points, wow.
That could change, but he's gonna project well. So that's gonna get people's attention on the slate anytime somebody like that projects well. We've seen this with Cortez before. I think it was like 3 weeks ago. He was up against Oakland, and he was like the top projected raw point pitcher, and he was, pretty inexpensive. He hasn't flashed much of a ceiling this season. Doesn't mean that he can't do it. Seattle does strike out at a pretty high clip, but I'm worried when these guys start projecting well. I do get worried about ownership. So if he's going to be a popular choice, I might tend to say to get underweight him, just because I've seen some other options that I kind of like better.
I agree with you. If he's going to be popular, I might just full on fade him. We talked about McClanahan and Joe Ryan already, who I have interest. Obviously, Nestor's at a bit of a different price point. I would rather go down to Brian Bayo than I would play Nestor Cortez into ownership. So I'd be fine saving a little bit of money here. Seattle does strike out a lot, like you mentioned, so that does add some ceiling to Nestor. But he's only been around an average strikeout rate this season, 23.6%, I believe it was. He hasn't had that long of a leash either. I think there's enough power in this Seattle lineup that they can get to him a little bit. I hope people play him because I'm excited to go underweight on Nestor Cortez. It's worked out so far this season. I think he was pretty popular his last time out against Baltimore because he was only 8,100. That Oakland game, like you mentioned, he was only 9,400 with that awesome matchup. He's been chalk multiple times and failed in those spots. So I'm more than willing to go underweight on Nestor Cortez. That price tag, I don't think there's any chance that he's low owned on this slate just because of the price tag. It is a solid upside matchup against Seattle, but I will be underweight and just hope that Seattle can get to him a little bit. Part of that reason is because of Logan Gilbert on the other side. He is my absolute favorite pitcher on the entire slate.
Really?
I talked about Joe Ryan and how his pitch mix has changed. the strikeout rate has spiked. Logan Gilbert is in the same boat. He's added a splitter this year. His strikeout rate is all the way up to 29.6%. I think I said McClanahan had the highest strikeout rate. He's 29.1. Gilbert's 29.6, higher strikeout rate than Shane McClanahan this year. I am fully buying what Logan Gilbert is selling this year. It's the Yankees, but it is a ballpark downgrade going to the West Coast to Seattle, a much better pitcher's park than Yankee Stadium. Logan Gilbert saves me $1,000. I love Joe Ryan. Don't get me wrong. Zach Gallen, we're going to talk about, is in a fantastic spot today. Absolutely love him as well. But Logan Gilbert will be my highest owned pitcher on the slate.
Well, yeah, I love the take. We'll talk about Gallen. Gallen's my favorite, but I love Gilbert too. Gallen's going to be way higher owned. We'll get to him, but I mean, Gilbert's going to be that pivot away from Gallen. Yeah, I love it. You know, it's a negative ballpark shift for the Yankees. You know, Gilbert's really he's had an amazing year. I'm not quite as bullish as you on him, but I love the take. I think he's a great play. And you know, it's just, you know, we all have to break our own pitchers into tiers, and Gilbert falls, I think, definitely falls below Gallen for me, and he falls below McClanahan for me. So he'd be my SP3.
So from a raw points perspective, I mean, if I was ranking him on CBRs tomorrow, I think he would be third for me as well. But I have him right in that top tier with those guys, point per dollar. And I don't think that the field will, like you said, like that's where I'm coming from. If we're looking at ownership projections 3 hours from the slate blocking, and Gilbert is getting as much ownership as Gallen, maybe I don't have quite as heavy of a stance on him. But I'm assuming that he's going to be lower owned just because people see the Yankees. They're a little bit concerned. You've got McClanahan against the Cubs, presumably with the wind blowing in a little bit. And you've got Gallen against the Rockies, who are just a horrible offense, especially away from Coors Field. So
yeah, Gallen's definitely going to be the highest owned. I'm not as convinced, I guess, as you that Gilbert's going to be that much different than McClanahan, but Gallen will definitely be the
so
chalk.
I think Gallen Cortez is the chalk. I might be wrong on that. Maybe people are soured on Cortez enough that they will want to pay up twice. Right. But I think they're going to look at that Nestor Cortez price and have a lot of interest.
Yeah. I think that's a valid point.
Yeah. All right. We're running pretty long here. I don't have any interest in bats on this. You can always play Aaron Judge as a one-off. Seattle bats, Cortez is solid enough. He gets enough ground balls. I'm not really interested in stacking up Seattle. Anything that you want to say about offenses in this game?
No, I'm glad you just brought up Judge. You can play him anytime he's low owned. Other than that, this is a very low total game. No interest.
All right, we'll keep it moving then. We have the Colorado Rockies against the Arizona Diamondbacks. We have Kyle Freeland going for the Rockies. We have Zach Gallen as a massive -250 favorite. Total in the game is 8 runs. Any interest in Kyle Freeland here against actually what's been a surprising Arizona offense?
I have no interest in Kyle Freeland.
No interest.
I have a lot of interest in the bats going up against him.
I'm right there with you. I'm not playing Freeland on this slate. Zach Gallen at 10-7 against this Colorado offense. Obviously going to be one of the top pitchers on the slate. I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so he's got, 28% K rate, 5% walk rate, going up against this really, really weak Colorado team. He's going to be the most popular pitcher on the slate. He's definitely going to be your cash game SP1. I'm very, very confident in that. It's going to be kind of up to your own risk tolerance if you want to get over or underweight him in GPPs. We heard Keith say that he wants, Logan Gilbert's going to be his highest owned pitcher. If I played 20 teams, I'm just a single entry player, but Gallen would be my highest owned guy. I think this is just an absolute amazing spot. Great floor, amazing ceiling. Gallen is my guy.
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to try to talk anybody off of Zach Gallen. He has put together an outstanding season. a couple hiccups here recently against Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Doesn't scare me a bit. I still think he's an outstanding pitcher. The matchup against Colorado out away from Coors Field is outstanding. He's too cheap for this matchup. I don't think there's any arguing that. But I do agree with you that he's going to come with quite a bit of ownership today. In the larger field contest that I like to play generally, I will have probably as much as the field. It's just not a guy I'm going to take a massive overweight stance on because I feel like I'm going to get a pretty significant ownership discount on a couple of the other guys. Because of Gallen, maybe I end up 10% under the field or something like that. Certainly on paper, the best play on the slate, no doubt about it. Hitters in this game, I think we can go ahead and skip over the Colorado side altogether. Zach Gallen's one of the best pitchers in baseball. No reason to pick on him on a 13-game slate. Arizona bats, what do you got for me?
Christian Walker, Gurriel would be my two favorite. Marte was not in the lineup on Monday, but I would assume there's no issue with him, and I assume he'd be back. Corbin Carroll, one of the best young hitters in all of baseball. And then Gabriel Moreno, assuming he's in the lineup, pretty cheap punt catcher. Love this Arizona stack. I'm hoping that I can get to them. So I'm going to have to find some mid-range pitchers that I like to go with Gallen and this Arizona team.
Yeah, I'm on Arizona bats as well. I love that you pointed out the lefties as well. Don't leave them out. Colorado bullpen, nothing to really be afraid of. They have been a little bit better this year than we've been accustomed to, but still middle of the pack bullpen. Freeland doesn't strike anybody out. Love the Corbin Carroll call. Pavin Smith is starting to hit a little bit. If he's in the lineup lefty, I feel like he might be one of the first guys they sit though, so he may not even be in the lineup. Moreno, the catcher, love him as a cheap option there. He's going to be a great pivot away from Alvarez for the Mets, who we talked about and loved. Both catchers in that low 3K range. Christian Walker is one of my favorite hitters on the entire slate. Ketel Marte is right up there at a weak second base position. Love the way Arizona sets up against Freeland. They will be one of my higher owned stacks as well. Moving on, 2 games left here. We've got the Pittsburgh Pirates against the San Francisco Giants. No total in this game. I think it's because San Francisco has an opener situation, so we're not exactly sure who's throwing baseballs for San Francisco today. We've got Johan Oviedo on the Pittsburgh side. Let's go. I didn't have a chance to look into who might be the bulk reliever. They've used Manaya in that role. They've used Jake Junis in that role.
The bat has Manaya, but okay. That, I mean, who knows, right? I mean, that could end up being, we might not know that until, later on Tuesday. I think, it's hard for us to be able to assess that right now. I think really though, it's not really a situation that we need to worry about. Manaya he's 5,900. So if we can really get solid word that he is going to throw, 75 pitches, 70 pitches, I think that's okay. He's better than a lot of the really, really cheap guys that we've discussed, but we're only speculating right now. So take that with a grain of salt.
Alex Wood, wasn't he used as a bulk reliever his last time out, or did he start that game against Milwaukee? He's 7,200 though. I don't think he's in play. Okay. But Manaya would be somewhat interesting, I suppose. Yeah. Junis's price is 8,500. I would have no interest in that.
No way you could do Junis.
Yeah. So I'm sure we'll get some sort of word on who we expect it to be. Keep an eye on the RG lineups page. We usually add a bulk reliever if we have confirmation of who it's going to be. So that'd be a good place to find it. Probably will be tweeted out as well from the RG account if we do have any concrete information, just to pay attention to. Tough situation to break down right now though, so we'll just kind of skip over that. Any interest in the Pittsburgh pitcher Oviedo?
No.
I agree with you. On a different slate, I might be able to talk myself into it just because San Francisco strikes out a little bit. But with Bayo at 7K. We've talked about a few other pitchers right in that 7K range. I'm going to find a way up to those guys if I need to pivot. Probably not going down to Oviedo. How about Pittsburgh hitters here? Let's go ahead and assume that it's Manaea just for the purposes of breaking this down. Any interest in Pittsburgh bats?
I think the slate's too big. I know Manaea could be a little bit inconsistent to say the least, but it's not really. Reynolds is very expensive. McCutcheon is, I think, too expensive. Brian Hayes. I mean, Pittsburgh. I think I'd pass on. It's really the San Francisco bats that I really like because of their prices. But Pittsburgh, I think I'm good.
Yeah, I agree with you. Pittsburgh's pricing is just kind of tough. And then with the bullpen situation, that always makes it difficult as well because you have to deal with matchups and things like that. So I agree. I don't think I'll be messing with Pittsburgh today. Tell me what you like here on the San Francisco side against Oviedo.
Yeah, so like Lamont Wade is 3K, Conforto's 3,800, Yaz is 3,700. I love all those lefties. I think they're priced really, really affordably. Mitch Haniger's 2,800. I think we saw Estrada go in the IL, so I think that VR has been replacing him. He's 2,600. JD Davis for 4,000. This team just seems too cheap in a spot that they can really go after. Not a horrible pitcher, but definitely exploitable pitcher. So I think they're another one of these teams where you could go like Gallen, Gilbert, and get 5 full stacks of a very talented team.
Yeah, I like this angle. I have some respect for Oviedo as a pitcher. Like he's not a gas can by any means. He's a below average strikeout pitcher. He walks too many guys as well. So he is certainly beatable. And then you add in the pricing on San Francisco here, and I can definitely be talked into some exposure. Love the call on the lefties. It's Yaz and Conforto, Wade. Casey Schmidt is a guy who has just come up and not stopped hitting and kind of played his way into an everyday role. So I like him at 3,200. Sable, if he's in there.
I was just gonna say, don't forget about Blake Sable too. He's really cheap. He's shown some pop. So I think this team is just very, very stackable.
Yep, I'm completely with you, and we've talked about it a couple of times. Guys with walk issues can put traffic on the bases, and you can start running up some fantasy points in a hurry. So really like this spot for San Francisco. All right, final game of the night here. We have the Washington Nationals taking on the Los Angeles Dodgers. Dodgers favored at -330. Jake Irvin going for the Nats. Tony Gonsolin going for the Dodgers, a 9-run total in this game. Jake Irvin, a matchup against the Dodgers, another one of these cheap pitchers. Any interest here in Jake Irvin?
No. Bad. This is just a really, really bad slate to, go try to punt pitcher against the Dodgers. I just don't see that ending well. I think there's better ways to construct your team. So I'm going to pass.
I just had to go count because I don't think I've ever seen a slate like this. There are 10 pitchers under 7K on this slate, which is just insane. There's going to be more upside in that mid-range. I agree. You don't need to go down this low, especially not against the Dodgers. I would even punt with other guys ahead of Irvin. Tony Gonsolin at 8K against low strikeout, low power Nationals team. How are we feeling about him?
Wrong slate for a guy that I don't think has much of a leash for his price. He's kind of like a pitcher that throws around 85 pitches. I think that you really got to hunt for a ceiling on the slate. Washington doesn't really strike out. This is a great run prevention spot for him. He'll probably, throw quite a few clean innings, but I don't think he has much of a ceiling at all.
Yeah, I'm with you that the pitch count, just not a long enough leash. The low strikeouts of Washington, they're not a good offense by any means, but they don't strike out very much either. Gonsolin's strikeout rate has come down each of the last 3 seasons. Obviously, he's working his way back from an injury. He's down below 20% this season. I think his true ability is more in like the 24% range, right around league average. But maybe not in this one against Washington. I think he's a pretty safe pitcher. But I'm with you. I don't see the ceiling. So
I would just rather find the extra money for a guy like Elder. Like if I'm looking for safety, and then if I'm looking for like a ceiling, I think Kikuchi has a better ceiling.
Yep, I agree with you there. All right, so skipping Gallen or Gonsolin today. Nobody's skipping Gallen.
Nobody's skipping Gallen.
Skipping Gonsolin. Are you playing any Washington bats against him?
No Washington bats. No.
Agree with you. They're cheap. So maybe you could talk me into a mini stack. But Gonsolin is a pretty good pitcher. But he's not going to go deep. A good Dodgers bullpen behind him as well. So no Washington bats for me either. How about Dodgers on the other side here against Jake Irvin?
I always love the Dodgers. The problem is that they're pretty expensive, so you got to find you can't double pay up at pitching. You have to find a couple mid-range pitchers or one expensive, one cheap pitcher that you're comfortable with in order to stack the Dodgers. But listen, it's the Dodgers. They're an amazing team. If you're an MMA player, you should probably make a rule to always have a Dodger stack because they have a massive ceiling day in, day out.
Yeah, huge upside, especially against a low strikeout pitcher. Irvin's, I think, been okay, but he has a walk problem. Walk rate's at 60%.
Huge walk problem, but he's got a decent K rate for a guy who's 5,300. But man, if he's going to be walking this Dodgers team, it's going to be a rough outing for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Bad Washington bullpen behind him as well. So all kinds of upside for the Dodgers. Certainly one of the better stacks on the entire slate. I think you want to find a way to spend up, which is where some of those cheap secondary stacks come in. It's where the guys like Brian Bayo come in as well. There's certainly plenty of options to be able to pay up for a guy like Gallen and still stack a few Dodgers. Definitely something that I will be doing. All right, we made it through 13 games. It was a long one. Do you want to go ahead and play the morning grind game here real quick before we get on out of here?
Yeah, you gotta have to remind me the rules.
All right, I can do that. So first question here is going to be a pitcher under 8K for 6 strikeouts or more.
Well, I'm going to steal yours, but I'm going to go Bayo.
Yeah, he is the very clear and obvious answer here under 8K. I think I'm going to go Belak. Minnesota has struck out a fair amount. I don't think it's likely that he gets 6 Ks, but I think that there's a chance that he could get 6 Ks in the matchup. Like I said, I have respect for Minnesota as an offense, but they do have some strikeouts in that lineup. Next question here: pitcher over 8K to score less than 15 DK points.
I'm gonna go Cortez.
I love it. That's who I was gonna say too. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think Seattle's a solid offense. Cortez has not. He's been right around league average with his strikeouts. So if he gives up a couple of runs, he might struggle to get to 15. Love that call. I think the other really risky guy up in this range is Kodai Senga. Like we said, we love his strikeout upside, but he's going to walk some guys, and Philly has a bunch of power that they could get to him. So I'll go Senga on this one. Who you like to hit a home run today over 4K salary?
Over 4K to hit
over
a home
4K
run.
To hit a home run. Yep.
All right. Gurriel Jr.
Love that call. Arizona, one of my favorite stacks as well. Give me Austin Riley against the lefty JP Sears, and if you can't get it done against Sears, he's got a couple at bats against that bullpen also. All right, under 4K to get 2 hits.
Alvarez for the Mets.
Love that call. Yeah, man, this kid's just been hitting like crazy. Took him a while to get going once he came up, but Francisco Alvarez fills the catcher position. Yep, absolutely love that call. I thought for sure you were going with your guy. You mentioned him. It was a great call. Minimum price, Royce Lewis. Great prospect for the Twins. Certainly don't mind his matchup today against Bielak either. So give me Royce Lewis to get it done again. And final question, give me a stack to score 6 or more runs.
I'm going to go the Giants.
I love that call. Off the board. Great call. Pricing is going to help you make things work today. So love that call with the Giants. I'm going to go a little bit chalky. I love this spot for Arizona. They're an underrated offense. I'm not sure they pick up quite as much ownership as they should today. So Arizona is going to be my favorite stack of the day. All right, Tim, you got anything else for the people before we get out of here? It's a nice long one. We appreciate everybody sticking with us. 13 games, nice big slate. So
yeah, thanks, Keith. Always a good time to do a show with you, and thanks everyone for listening. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Stevie will be back tomorrow. I'm not sure who is on with him. I believe I have the night off from the morning grind. You don't happen to be on tomorrow, do you, Tim?
I'm not on, no.
All right. So Stevie will be back. He will have a new guest for you guys to help you break down Wednesday's baseball slate. But we appreciate everybody listening. Have a great day.